This is a game of Magnus Carlsen, although you might mistake it as a game of Richard Report. Apparently entitled Tuesday this week, Nakamura also played 5 out of 6 white games with 1 B3. So I think Richard Report is the new trendsetter in chess openings, huh? Okay, so Carlsen scored 4-0 this week, and you know, since he's joined the lineup, the Gnomes have been doing super well. So obviously he's like a candidate for MVP, but he almost lost in the first round against a 2200 rated player, the 4th board of the Dynamite, which was kind of sensational, and unfortunately the kid flagged while beating the world champion. But he bounced back and showed that adversity doesn't cause him to completely self-destruct. And check out how quickly he comes back in this game here. The Flying Squirrels would be an awesome team name. That's right, Robert. I'm glad that you're also a squirrel lover. What do you want to choose from the Pacific Perpetual Stalemate? You want to choose like a game for me to go over, or what? And we've got some other Kraken fans. Cool. All right, sorry. So many chat comments, I can't answer all of them. So here's Carlsen flying out with his queen, coming to h5 on move 6. This is definitely an unusual position. And yeah, it tries to disrupt these knights. And whenever h6 comes, you know knight takes f7 is going to come. It comes. And yeah, what more to say about this? Magnus shows that he's shaken off the first round just fine. And you see he's just up a pawn and cruising immediately. We will be looking at the endgame between So and Melik today, yep. And knight b5 is a sweet move, which accelerates how fast this game ends. So basically, if pawn takes knight, he can play rook takes knight, and he threatens the bishop, and he also threatens to go anywhere he wants with his king on the next move, with his rook on the next move. So for example, you know, something like this could happen: rook check, king here, and then in this position you can play rook d7, bishop h8, or probably he can also just go rook to g6, threatening the bishop and threatening the rook. And basically comes out with another extra pawn and black's structure damaged and king on the run some more. So knight to b5, the bishop just comes back to defend g7. White's threatening rook g7, double check anyway. And yeah, massacre. The game is instantly over. So so a little Magnus for you there. Now we're gonna bounce around to just some of my favorite games. I haven't played through every single game from the day, but you know, I get up in the morning on Wednesdays nowadays and I just start watching the East, and then I watch like some of the Central. At some point I have to like maybe run out and do an errand or get lunch or something, but I watch a lot of Pro Chess League, so I've seen a lot of the games this week, and these are just some of my personal favorites. Cool, this game automatically pops to a point that I think is pretty close to where I want it to be. So this position here is kind of a London system by white, where black has sacrificed a pawn to get ahead in development and get active. And this knight on f4 against this pawn g2, pawn h3 is quite strong in general, kind of owning this bishop, which has actually sadly retreated to f1 in order to cover g2 at some point already. Yeah. So this is a sweet, sweet move here from black, knight to b4. If you're looking at like, this is, by the way, white is on the Gorky Stormbringers and black is on the Budapest Gambit. That's the match this is from. Olka is, I think he's Oliver Mihawk on the second board for Budapest Gambit, newly minted Grandmaster. So here, like, black's got every single piece active, right? And white doesn't, so it's obviously time to attack. But then how do you pursue the attack? You have to find a way to break through. And sometimes you would like throw a pawn down and try and crack white's armor, but here you already lost your B pawn. There's no obvious hook for your A pawn, right? So he's got to find some other way to get through, and that means it's sacrifice time. So if you ever have a position like this as black, look at sacrifices. That's my one advice for this kind of position. Just look for sacrifices. Olka does so. He throws in knight to b4. Now he's already threatening something like knight to d3 because he controls this square, and then knight to f2, so he can win an exchange there. He also has the idea of knight takes a2, queen takes a2, rook takes b3, opening up the b file, which would also be super decisive. Like if white played, I don't know, knight e1 to cover d3, then this should be a good move. Probably, yeah. There's a good chance there's another winning move as well, but this would definitely do it. So c takes b4, white takes the knight, black takes it, tempo on the queen, and now chases the king back into the center from whence he came. Here, check, here, rook takes. All right. So far, this is a very, very safe piece sacrifice by black, in my opinion. Now, I mean, you might say he only's got one pawn for the piece, but if you look at like his activity, the possibility of winning like g2 or f2 or a2, the fact that the white king can never castle, even though he's back on e1, right? He's going to have to somehow castle by hand, and it's hard to see how this rook gets in the game. I think this is a very, very safe position to be down a piece in. And I would expect that black has multiple ways to come out ahead. So white plays knight to d2, and now black plays yet another beautiful move. I think that when I was watching this game live, some people were saying like e5 is like the super obvious move here, trying to open the e file to checkmate the white king. Right? But to me, the first move to look at even before e5 is rook takes d4, also trying to play queen e5. But it tries to play queen e5 in two moves, whereas e5, if white doesn't answer this move, it takes you 2-3 moves to play queen e5, right? So rook d4 lets you play queen e5 check one move faster. So to me, this is the first move to look at, and it's also what Olka played. If you are afraid of sacking a piece unless you can see a concrete winning line, you need to just sack a piece without seeing a concrete winning line. Do that a bunch of times in your games, and you'll start to get less afraid of it. You just got to get over that fear, man, because that's part of chess. You got to be willing to do that. You can't always calculate every concrete line. Tal threw his pieces around without calculating too much. So do it. You know, or maybe start playing an opening like the Halloween Gambit, or what's similar, the Cochrane Gambit and the Petrov knight takes f7. Just give away a piece like on move 4 or 5 in the opening when you obviously can't have a winning line yet, and then just practice playing down a piece so you start losing that fear. All right, so rook takes d4, very good. Queen comes in to e5. If knight e2, then knight t3 is good night, sweet prince. So he plays bishop e2, and now black can take on d4. Now, just as I said a couple moves ago that black had a very, very safe position down a piece, now he's got a very, very safe position down a rook. Because still, white can't get out of this without losing stuff, and you've got 2 pawns for your rook, you know, so whatever, you're doing good. You've got queen e5 maybe coming next. Come back to e5. The white pieces can't really move much. If this knight moves, there's rook takes e2. So this is really a pretty risk-free down a rook position. Yeah, so he threatens queen e5, queen e2 checkmate again. If queen e3, there's knight to g2, winning the queen. Yeah, moves yo gambit, it's a good choice. Just get over your fear. So the queen has to come to f3 instead of e3, and now he plays bishop d3, and yeah, that's it. Wins the game like that. That wins a piece on e2, so you can see that now that he's taken this piece, black has a bishop and 2 pawns against this rook on h1. You know, you see he won like very easily in like a few more moves with these sacrifices. He couldn't calculate every possible random move for white, but you know, when you're looking at a position like this one here, you don't need to calculate rook h2 and rook g1 10 moves deep to know that you have a winning position. Okay, yes, white has legal moves. They could play queen c7. They're never going to back rank mate you. They can play rook h2. They can play, I don't know, king f1. But like, you don't need to calculate all these things 20 moves ahead. You know, you just play it, and then a few moves later, your winning tactics start to become apparent. And here he focuses e2 and just wins a piece there in a couple moves. Takes this here. I wonder if black could have played knight d4 here instead of taking the g-pawn. He can't take this because he's pinned, and I'm trying to play knight c2 checkmate. I don't see anything other than rook c1, and then you can play knight c2. And win like this. This is super safe and easy. Well, I don't know. I don't see any defense to knight d4, but anyway, in the game, black has so much that he just traded the queen, took on g3, and now he's got 3 pawns and a piece against a rook. This pawn's weak, this pawn's weak. You know, and black won this game pretty easily. We're not going to go through it all. Nice knight sack, nice rook sack, good pawn sack before that. Easy life. All right. So, yeah, that was one of my favorite games. Now, let's see a very weird game from the Marseilles match. I think Central Division is when I had lunch this week, so I didn't see as many of these games. So there's like a few less of them. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave went 4-0, but I haven't even seen all his games, so I don't know how great they were. I'm sure they were pretty good. So that's going to be the main thing missing from this highlight reel, I think. This is kind of a funny game. This is Etienne Bacro as white, Baki 83, and Romain-Edouard Muggsy. So 2 of the top 5 French players playing against each other. And Romain-Edouard plays this, I think it's called English defense, this weird b6, bishop b7 with f5. And it leads to weird positions, as you can see. The idea of this c5 move is to trap the bishop on b4 with a3. If the bishop goes back, then you can take on c5. Then black has to play c6 to tuck the bishop on c7, which you can see is not super attractive. So instead, he gets it a little bit more room by sacking the pawn back. And now white cracks e6, so the black king is going to be weak here. They develop some pieces. White can't get this one out. So it looks like black has some chances for his gambit at this point, but he also looks like he might lose a second pawn. So he plays like a little bit aggressively here rather than just developing his pieces, which probably would be his best shot here. would be to develop that knight and just give another pawn and wait for white to figure this kingside out while developing quickly. Instead, he goes kind of aggressive here without getting these two pieces out first, trying to introduce the power of the bishop, which is logical. But after rook e6, he has to respect the threats of like rook e7 or rook to anywhere, rook to b6, etc., rook to c6. Sorry to everybody for not mentioning the checkmate in the previous one with knight d4, queen takes queen, knight c2 mate. My apologies. All right, and then with this, basically, he's able to get his rook to the 7th rank and then block this bishop from f3. So I think this idea of c5 basically kind of failed at this point. And now Eduard's in trouble. He tries bishop d8, rook to e8, and suddenly his back rank is weak. Few too many pieces retreated there. And after knight to d7 to cover f8, anybody who wasn't watching care to find how Bakro scored here? You got it. You got it, FCST. And 197. He takes the knight, and Eduard resigns, and suddenly white's winning a miniature out of this game. So that was a pleasing quick win for white, despite the problems with the rook on h1, which I think we can take back to this moment and say, instead of going for c5 too early, black needs to continue developing these pieces and let white, see if white plays h3 or g3, king g1, what they do about that. And, maybe play king h8 at some point to get out of this stuff. Maybe black would still have a shot. I mean, his position doesn't really look bad to me at this point. It just looks messy. Okay, there's one game from the Snowballs that I wanted to find, but I forgot to load it in advance, so I'm going to find it for you now. No, that's not it. Hang on. Just give me a second to find this game. It's worth it. You'll see. This was one of my favorite games, so... All right. So this game, the Snowballs had brought in a new player. The Stockholm Snowballs had brought in a new player, a new free agent for this game, for this playoff match, to play board 3. They've been playing with Meyer and Agrest like every round, pretty consistent about that. Well, I think my pairings are already gone. But they've been playing Meyer, Agrest, and Agrest basically every round. And they brought in a new player, Cristobal, to play for them. And so it was a real unknown how well or how badly he would do. Howdy, Gravity Guy. And here is like his very, very first game. He plays white against a GM. He's a very high-rated IM, pretty close in level to GMs. His very first game here, he plays very nicely, setting up that pass b5 pawn. And here there's no d4, which you might like to play as black to have comparably strong pawns because of queen e4. So he's able to break off a piece of black's center. And once he does, it's a question about which of these pawns is more valuable and important. They each look really, really good. I mean, the b5 pawn is kind of killing this knight a little bit and has some threats to become to advance as a pass pawn. The e5 pawn is blocking this knight and this bishop, so he's doing his work as well and controlling the center. But the key is that white now goes quickly for this bishop e4 plan, trades off this bishop, and once he does, you'll see that the black position looks worse than the white position in the emerging situation, right? Now this pawn is like stronger with a couple pieces off the board. Now these squares are a little bit weaker on the light squares for black with the bishop traded. And white's going to emphasize the fact that, you know, black hasn't yet developed the knight and that white can get to the central files with his rook. So gets rid of back rank mate since they're about to maybe fight for files. Okay, so let's come to this point. This knight c5 move at first looks like a shot. It breaks the coordination of the rook and the bishop, and that means that black has rook d1 or queen d1 next. So it actually looks like a blunder by white, but he has prepared this move, queen g6, and after this is taken, he doesn't play rook b6, which is not great after queen f4 check. Instead, he throws in this move, rook f6. And this totally turns things on its head. It covers queen f4, and it turns out he doesn't need this bishop in order to get a strong attack with queen check, queen h5 check, and then you know, maybe like rook f5 here or something. Well, let me give you a sample line. So let's say I saved this bishop here instead of stopping queen f7. Then queen check, king here, queen check, king here, queen check, king here, and then this move with the idea of rook h5. And well, you can see that black is in major trouble. Like they could try and block on h6 with their rook, and then knight to g5, and if back it's mate, and otherwise, you know, you can sack your queen and still lose. So so this rook f6 was very sweet, sort of a counter tactic, and so black plays rook f8 to stop queen f7. He trades off and then takes the piece back here and forces his way into this queen endgame. A nice little technique to stop black playing h4 and poking at his king position. Now a single queen covering f2 can safeguard his whole king from all perpetuals, and he can move the b pawn, and does, and wins. So nice game for him. And now let's move on to the Miami champions. So so I mentioned that Magnus Carlsen and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave each managed to score 4 out of 4, despite a pretty serious scare for Magnus. So the other best blitz and rapid player in the world, Hikaru Nakamura, well, we'll get to Wesley So as well. Nakamura, playing here for Miami, did not lead his team with a perfect 4-0. So here he is playing against Alain Pichot, or Alan Pichot. I don't know. His last name sounds so French that it makes me say his first name French. Sorry. But anyway, this guy is board 3 for Argentina. A world junior champion, super talented young player, exactly the kind of player that I think you want in your lineups in this pro chess league, like Ariane Tari, who scored 3 out of 4 on second board for the Gnomes this week. Also a junior player rated about 2,600 FIDE. I think in general, these kind of like young, talented grandmasters are really valuable in the pro league. So here he's playing like a classic structure, the kind of Queen's Gambit exchange, where you've unfortunately played b6 and bishop b7 for black, so you can't just block the c file with c6. And you want to either play c5 or knight e4 or a5 or maneuver all the pieces to kingside. It's kind of tricky to play this. This one little detail means there's a whole different set of plans in play. So let me throw out some moves here and get to the key point. He plays this a5 move, unable to play c5. And now he goes after the b5 pawn. Very key playing this a4 move. And he just plays a very good game here, going after b5 and a3 here with his pieces. Yes, Magnus won on time in a losing position against the board 4 of the Delhi Dynamite. Right, so here b5 is attacked, defends it, goes after a3, and you know, white could stay passive with rook to a2 or a1 or something like that, and then I think with his knight defended, black's plan might even be bishop c8 to d7, but we'll never know because Hikaru goes into some tactics here with rook to c1, trying to stop bishop a3 because of the idea of rook c7. But Pichot is not scared at all, calculates, and goes for it. So if white simply recaptures, this is going to be pretty easy to show the superiority of the rooks. Do you guys agree? This rook is defended, and he's motoring the a-pawn down. So, I mean, this is kind of scenario where basically on like queen a2, you can pretty much just play rook c7, c2 to win. And if you calculate that that doesn't work, you could go c4, b4, b2, kind of the slow way. But white is just like completely passive here and will definitely lose to this rook and pawn. If you didn't have the rook on e7, you might be able to draw this kind of endgame. If this were a pawn instead, and you could just go e6 and just sit here. So Hikaru goes for bishop takes d5. If Pichot takes back, he's got queen c8 mate. But here Pichot plays just a fantastic move. This is like quite the calculation, remembering that like they've used up most of their time and it's like a rapid game with a 2-second increment, you know, and he's already played this complicated middle game. But he finds bishop to b4. And the point is that on bishop takes b7, rook takes b7, queen c8, bishop f8, he just gives up this rook, and like we said, this a-pawn looks like he can pretty much win. But there's one more detail here. On queen takes b6, a2, queen a5 is not sufficient, but black goes to a4, and the queen actually doesn't have any way to attack the rook or get to a1 in time. So that's a pretty sweet calculation to see this position here when he plays this bishop b4 move. And once he finds that detail, he's just in control here, right? Hikaru's at least blockaded the a-pawn, but he's got 2 rooks and a good a-pawn, and he won the game without too much trouble from here. Goes after f2, and GG. Yeah, I'm pretty impressed with that calculation myself. All right, hence it's one of our highlights. Well, Hikaru's tough day didn't end there because the champions did lose, and here was the last game of the match, or the deciding game of the match. This is round 4. Hikaru's playing black against Sandro Mareco. First board for the Krakens, and Mareco, I'm pretty sure, scored 3.5 out of 4 against this incredible lineup of the champions. So Mareco was really, really huge in this match. So first of all, it's kind of a funky opening. He plays basically, what's this gambit called again? The Blumenfeld gambit. He plays the Blumenfeld gambit with white, right? Oh, Hikaru did better than Pout Outsmiter, you'll see. So he just plays down that pawn on the queen side, but the compensation is obviously a strong center. Skip forward a few moves. And you see white still has his center, black still has his pawn. This is the vulnerable point in this gambit in general. So very smart, obviously, of Hikaru to put his bishop on h6. I'm sure he knew about that. And now he tries to, explode the e file and go after e3. And e5 is the logical counter. So So this position here is kind of critical for Sandro. And I think objectively, Hikaru's played very, very well up to this point and achieved a much better position for himself. But now Mareco correctly says, like, okay, things are going really badly if Hikaru opens up this E file. So time to mess this thing up. D5. Right, so I mean, obviously black has to take. They're not going to let white play c6 and d6 and stuff, right? So they take. Now, Mareco's able to get one of the pawns on the king side in exchange for his center pawn. So that changes the nature of the game. His center is in shambles, right? But now he's opened up Hikaru's king a little bit. So he's got, you know, shots at creating an attack over there. But the Hikaru's queen gets really strong and active here. It's got its eye on a bunch of his pieces. There's a threat of e4. So Mareco is kind of all in here and does not play bishop to f5, e4 in this position. Instead, he just goes for bishop f7. And king takes, knight g5. So he opens up a desperate, desperate-ish counterattack here against, or attack against Hikaru's king. Hikaru retreats king g8. Had he taken the knight, there's queen check, and on king f6 to defend the bishop, there's rook over to f2. So basically, he will lose back this piece on g5, the second piece, and you know, be caught with his king in the middle. And of course, it's more accurate to play rook d6 here and just checkmate. But I'm just trying to give you guys the idea that he can't take the second piece and defend it because of rook f2. Okay. So on knight g5, he retreats the king. I guess the other move to point out is king g6, defending his bishop and attacking the knight. But mainly the point of king g6 is to prevent queen h5. It's refuted by rook to d6 probably. Hang on, guess I have to calculate. King takes g5. I just assumed that this would be it. But actually on king g5 you can't play mate because of the queen on a4. So you would have to play rook c4. And is this winning for white? It seems to answer checkmate. Hikaru has to sack his queen. And now he's got enough pieces for the queen, but I doubt he can cover all the threats. Queen g4, h4, queen f7, bishop c1. So let's just assume that this would be lost. And that is why Hikaru runs backwards with his king here. So the queen comes to h5. If bishop g5, queen g5 check, and white will have time to bring the rook to d7. Hikaru can't take the rook on c2 because of check here instead of taking the bishop. And then mate. So on queen h5, Hikaru plays the best defense, which is rook e7, covering the second row. Now he can block for the king. He stops queen f7 and queen h7. And if Mareco takes on h6 now, then I think Hikaru is free to start gobbling with his queen. And everything falls apart for Sandro, and he would lose, I'm pretty sure. So on rook e7, he plays rook f2, saving the rook from the queen and just, you know, getting near the king for further threats. Hikaru can't save this bishop because of checkmate still. So he now just trades it off, which is correct, captures rook g7, and the queen just has to move. So basically, he's still down a full piece, right? He's sacked a full piece. He got, you know, a pawn for it, but he was playing a gambit earlier, so he's down a full piece. But he has some chances in this position. Hikaru's defended well by getting this rook here, but the rest of his pieces are not in position to defend. White has some possible threats coming from this position. One of them is to take on b6, Like if I just wait for a move somehow. There's an idea of taking on b6, takes on b6, and then queen f8. So that's one idea White has, is to go after after f8 with c takes b6. Black could consider b5 just to avoid that threat. Other idea for White is to play rook d7, with or without queen e6 check first. But the point of rook d7, whoops, sorry. I'll play my placeholder move again. Rook d7. The point of rook d7 is to eliminate the best defender that the black king has, and once that guy's gone, the remaining queen and rook will be able to deliver checkmate. So there'll be no way to defend this king once these pieces get traded. And there's queen e6 check, king h8, queen f6 is an idea. There's rook takes rook, king takes, queen f7 check, or queen f6 and lifting this rook to f5 and g5. So there's actually still a lot of danger in this position, that basically Sandro probably wants to play rook d7 if you play b5, and he's got threats against that bishop and the king at the same time. So Hikaru really needs some more defenders over here. I don't know if he even has a defense or what his defense is. I'd have to look at this position for a while to figure that out. But he tried to bring the most close piece over, the knight, to come over here and block rook d7 and do it with a tempo. But some of you may know what Sandro did in response to knight e7 that kept Hikaru from ever transferring another piece over to the king side. In fact, somebody gave a spoiler, a perpetual spoiler earlier in chat, so I'll just show it to you guys, I guess. He goes queen c8, and whichever piece recaptures, there's rook d8 and checkmate. Okay. But in fact, after queen takes c8, Hikaru didn't recapture or resign. He just, I don't know, walked away from his computer, and the time slowly ticked down, and then the Krakens won on time in this position, which had a lot of the live audience talking about what a high level of class was being demonstrated there. But I'll say this: Hikaru has always taken losses really badly on the surface of it, like emotionally. Like I'm actually about to tell you that it's not really such a bad way to take losses, but like badly in the sense that he seems really upset when he loses. But if you look at the arc of his career, it seems that like getting really upset when he loses has fueled him to continually improve, and people who don't care when they lose are not going to get as good as angry rage quitters, I guess. Not that I'm telling you guys to rage quit, please don't, I would rather you guys all be gentlemen and be 100 points lower rated than Hikaru than you all become a bunch of 2800s who are rude to their opponents. But in any case, if you're dead set on becoming better, you could always turn into this kind of angry monster. Yeah, McEnroe, another guy who didn't take losing happily. So yeah, but a huge day for Sandro Mareco with 3.5 out of 4. I'm going to show you another game of his game against Linier Dominguez. So, Miami wasn't just, that was the decisive game in the 4th round, but Miami wasn't just sporting one Super GM. Miami was sporting 2 Super GMs. So here's Sandro Mareco playing another game against Linier Dominguez. And, yeah, he must have felt like he was in some kind of like Tata Steel round robin or something with like the pairings he had today. And he managed to score 3.5 out of 4. Here's his draw. I'm just going to show you, like, I think he played a very, very good game to draw here against against Dominguez, who plays the currently most popular line against the Caro-Kann at the top level, the knight f3, bishop e2 short variation of the advanced variation. And yeah, I think this is just like a very, very high level game that gets played here. So if you guys just want to see what like a super high class Caro-Kann looks like, this game's not full of like tactics. Neither player blunders and gets mated. It's just a really high level game. So well, Lot Spiny saying in a society where everyone gets a participation award, it's nice to see someone caring about losing and, you know, really like wanting to be the best or wanting to be their best and so on. But I think you don't have to look very far at a chess tournament to find other people who take losses pretty hard. I think within our sub society of chess players, Lot Spiny, I don't know if you play in OTB tournaments, but I think within our sub society of chess players, you will find a lot of people who care a heck of a lot. I've seen some angry people, and I have been an angry person, so yeah. Although those days are behind me now, I think. At least judging from my last tournament, for the first time, I didn't seem to care too much about winning and losing. All right, so this is all like classic stuff. Like Black's played g5 to have some space on the king side against his bishop getting chased, and to play bishop g7 and pressure e5. White brings the knight to d3 with tempo and gets this f4 break. And you know, Black might want to run to the king to the queen side with his king to get out of everything else that White's finally starting to open things up against him. If you saw me play in Vegas as a teenager, you probably remember when I cared a lot about winning or losing. Really, you find a lot of apathy at tournaments. That is pretty surprising. Maybe there is some. I don't know. Maybe a new generation of chess players. I'm used to chess players being pretty mad when they lose. Anyway, continuing with this game. So it might make sense to just kind of castle queenside, but then Black will lose a pawn on g5 and bishop g5 and coming to f6. So he chooses instead to regain the pawn on e5 while developing his bishop and leave the king here another moment. And yeah, doesn't get a chance to castle with the king in the end. But after all these trades, White's able to prevent the Black king from castling, but Black keeps offering these queen trades, and White's not able to get around that. White still has a small lead in development, but Black has enough to hold everything together. The bishop could be better than the knight in the endgame, but you'll see that Black immediately activates his advantage, the pawn mass in the center, in order to try and break open some square for his knight. Rather than trying to maneuver with a knight against a bishop, he knows the board's open enough that White can eventually marshal his h-pawn and find ways to open his bishop. So instead he tries to open his knight as fast as possible and activate his pawn pair. And the game quickly leads to a very balanced endgame. Black activates the knight, White activates the h-pawn, and Black is going to get this knight f3 pattern, rook and knight on f3. Pretty much always a perpetual check in the endgame, sometimes a win. So Dominguez just takes the draw himself. And I think that was actually just like a super, super high-class, high-quality game. Even though it may not look that exciting to you guys, I think this game's very worthy of just playing through if you ever want to know what the Caro-Kann Advance should look like. It should look pretty much like that, even though that's a rapid game and not a tournament and not like a slow tournament game. So let's turn our attention to the other match from the Atlantic Division. And board one for the Chessbrahs was manned by Li Chao and Caruana. They're both free agents, so they can't play together, unfortunately, for the Chessbrahs. So they take turns playing board one, and they managed a combined 4 out of 4 this week. So they performed just as well as MVL or Carlsen together, Li Chao and Caruana. I think Li Chao is so good at rapid chess that it's just about as good for the Chessbrahs when he plays as when Caruana plays. I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm not good enough to really judge these guys. But that's the feeling I get. And Li Chao has a supreme score so far in the league. We'll see how that keeps up. My highlight from him is actually him playing against the board 4 of the Sopranos. But, the Sopranos have a pretty balanced lineup. Their board 4 is, about 2,400 FIDE, Nicholas, Cheka, and IM. So it's not like they've got like a bad board 4 by any means. But I thought this game was pretty unusual and awesome because he plays the Snake Benoni, which is a rare guest and super provocative on his part, like really saying like, I'm going to get you out of comfort zone and he's wanting to win with black. And so this gives us a little sense of this question of like, how far will a top GM go to try and win with black against lower rated players they feel they should beat. And this is an interesting example of what they might do or what they might try. So bishop g5 is also how I would play against the Snake Benoni. Now, the old point of the Snake Benoni was to come to c7, then you have d6. Your bishop's helping to stop white's e5 breakthrough, and the bishop can come to a5 to help with queenside counterplay. But if your opponent's going to spend a long time bringing their bishop to the queenside, it makes a lot of sense to try and punish black on this g5 to d8 diagonal, where the bishop won't be there anymore. But interestingly, and yeah, you also play e3 instead of e4 in this line because your e4 is going to be vulnerable at first if they come to a5, for example. And also once your bishop's out and possibly getting traded for the knight, you'd rather have a pawn on e3 than e4 if you're going to trade this bishop. So, I mean, so far, so good by white. And now, surprisingly, Li Chao brings his bishop back to f8 instead of continuing the maneuver. So it's like he's just played the Benoni without playing g6, bishop g7. It's kind of weird. I don't know how it should be any good. You'll see that later on in this game, he will bring the bishop to g7 eventually. Well, it seems kind of inevitable now that he comes back to f8. So here I would have put the bishop on d3 for white, but whatever. h3 is to stop black from playing bishop g4 and trading this terrible piece. So it's mostly good play by Cheka so far. Exactly what most other people, GMs or anyone would do as white against this opening. And now Li Chao brings his bishop to g7 finally. And now he hasn't lost that many tempi compared to the Benoni because he played g5 in one move instead of g6, g5. He's only lost 1 tempo now instead of 2. So it's almost a normal Benoni position, and white's played e3 to e4, so maybe it's just a normal Benoni position somehow. Oddly, huh? Oh, does d6 work after bishop f8? Sorry, there's a little delay in the stream probably, or the chat or something, so I didn't see your question time. Does d6 work? Well, d6 is probably not very good because of queen b6 attacking it and attacking b2. Let's see. There is bishop takes f6 though. So maybe if I want to play queen b6, I should first play h6. Then bishop takes f6 looks bad for you. But now your bishop defends this. Okay, so basically it's not completely simple how to handle your d6 move. How about rook e6? Can we go after the pawn that way? And now the queen's also free to go to a5 or b6. Yeah, I think that seems right. And now if you go knight b5. check here, takes. I think you take with the knight to cover e4 as well. Now bishop d6 to cover knight c7, knight c4. You know, this could actually like work out for white in some lines, right? Like this wins a rook. Let me go back a moment. Okay, you guys are suggesting a lot of moves. I guess we could spend a long time analyzing this position actually to get the full answer, and I'm kind of trying to sort of speed through a bunch of highlights. So I don't think I'm going to go super in depth into this. I will say that my first conclusion is that d6 doesn't instantly lose the pawn, but it's not really a very good move here. Like, it's only hindering this bishop coming out via d6, but the bishop's better off coming to b7 anyway. It's also letting this knight come to c6. So even if black can't win this pawn, I'm not a fan of this move d6, honestly. You know, maybe black will play a6 here with the idea of b5, get you to play a4. Now they don't need to worry about knight b5. Then they could calculate this line and this stuff. Or then they can always just play b6, bishop b7, knight c6 with a fine position. So d6 is just not actually a strong move, whether or not black can win the pawn. All right, back to our situation. Here, Cheka tries to fight back on the king side, opening the f-file right away and gaining more space for the g3 bishop that was kind of hemmed in. And they fight. He trades off his bad light-squared bishop, but to do so, this is his big like positional decision. To be able to play bishop g4 and get rid of his bad and offload his bad piece, he trades on e5 himself, leaving him with like terribly weak dark squares. Also, black is a little bit cramped in the Benoni, so like you're not usually looking to trade a bunch of pieces. So I think this is like a major mistake here when he makes this trade. And now the queen comes out, and I think black's probably just better. You know, at some point they could just play b6 and open their rook against the b pawn if they want to, or they can attack e4 as he does in the game, and they can combine that with threats against the white king, which is why I think he goes after e4 rather than b2, is because he's also looking to, he thinks it's easier to combine the weak dark squares with the play against e4. So yeah, he switches the bishop from e5 to g3, which is very interesting and instructive. Normally the bishop's great on this long diagonal, but here he was realizing on e5 he can always get hit by knight c4 and knight f3. By coming here, he actually keeps white from defending this pawn with his rook and keeps control of all these weak dark squares on the king side for the moment. So he covers g3. Plays f5 to open up his rooks. Now white's got issues with this back rank. The threat is like knight to g3 to go after this f1 square, or rook f1 first and then knight g3. So white gets out of the fork. He trades anyway, comes to g3. Chase, chase, chase. Now the queen can't take on c4 because of queen e3. So he's just really like hitting white with every little restraining move, taking away the squares from white's pieces. And finally, a not as super complicated but winning tactic, rook e1 check. And if rook takes, there's queen takes queen. You know, white just couldn't keep covering queen e3 and every other tactical possibility here. So rook check, knight comes back to defend, trades. And this wins in exchange for black, and he won the game very easily from here. So that was a pretty awesome game, in my opinion, from Li Chao. Now let's see a game from Caruana. Okay, and I'm going to go right to the heart of this game here. All right, so here's Caruana as white against Robert Hess. Did you see those tactics? I don't know. Only you can tell us whether or not you saw these tactics. How would we know? All right, so this is Caruana for the Chessbrahs, again, playing against Robert Hess of the Sopranos. They've got a tense Najdorf going on, and here Caruana gets ahead after knight c7 by just trading. If the rook takes, he hangs a8, so the queen takes, excuse me, and he gets a free pawn on the king side. But after b5, Hess might still be able to quickly muster some counterplay. The white king is weak on the second row. White needs something pretty strong here. So what he comes up with is he trades and brings the rook out onto the c file that black is opening. So trades, check, here, and now black doesn't have time to play queen f2, which would be essentially winning if not for his own back rank. Like if the black knight were on f8 here, you know, Robert might just win, or you know, get a big advantage with queen f2 or queen g1, similar deal. But unfortunately, there's just checkmate because h7 is covered. So so here after king h3, black has to take time out to deal with his weak back rank, and f6 is not going to do it for many reasons. But let's see if I can just stumble upon the fastest checkmate, hopefully. So he plays g6 to deal with the back rank. And now Caruana finally has something to do with this not very good light squared bishop. At least it had an open diagonal, right? And it was waiting for this. Boom! Moment in the sun. Rook h2 check from Robert. Sweet counter. If he just takes here, then he obviously loses to queen g6 check and... oh, sorry. To rook e8 first? No, then king f7. Okay, so queen g6, king f8. If rook check, there's knight blocks now. Check, here, check. Gotta come here, here. And I guess black will lose to rook takes d8. So Hess goes rook h2 check. And he doesn't even take it because here, check, here. What's the deal? What's the deal? This doesn't, oh yeah, this is the deal. Queen here, check. If king h2, you come back. And if the king comes up, now you can take here with check, so white cannot play bishop d3. See, it just won't let me play bishop d3 to win the queen. So instead, you know, bishop e4 and king here. And the endgame continues. Right, not over yet. So on rook h2 check, Caruana just lets him have that. Keeps marching with the king. All right, so now he's got to take it. The rook that broke through h2 comes to the defense, miraculously. But this knight's not participating in any way, and this attack rages on, and Caruana wins here with a very easy little tactic of e7 check. Rook c8 also wins instead of e7 check. And then just here and its mate. Nice. So, so the top boards did their job for the Chessbrahs. Eric Hansen also did very well on board 2, and they carried that match. And now out to the Pacific. And by the way, for those who care, one of the commentators in the Twitch chat is saying that the d6 move was good for white in Li Chao's Snake Benoni, because white could quickly follow up with bishop c4 and queen b3, just attacking f7 really quickly, and black doesn't have a good way to defend it apparently. So that's odd. If rook c8, the knight still blocks. What position do you want me to spend 30 seconds on? Perpetual stalemate. Mamedyarov's first round game. Okay. Mamedyarov's first round game. All right, I'll go find that for you. We got a request here, folks. So let's find Mamedyarov. Games. But Mamedyarov's first round game was like a 10-move draw. Wasn't it?
And we have pretty sharp situation in the game between Wk2 and Ray Robson.
Okay. Whoa.
Just
You're not kidding.
Oh.
That was just a joke, man. That was just a joke. His first round game as white. No. He didn't play that game. Ivan played that game for sure. All right. Instead, we go to Mamedyarov's fourth round game against Alexander Shimanov. Now, Shimanov played one single game for the Webster Windmills. Webster has been... So first of all, they're based on the college team from Webster University. Ton of talented GMs and IMs there. And they have been switching in and out different players more than any other team. And they brought in Alex Shimanov only to play one game. Round 4 against Mamedyarov. I'm not taking anything I said back. I make all kinds of jokes, and I also misspeak at times on air. If you talk for like dozens of hours or hundreds of hours in front of other people off the cuff, you're going to say some stuff that puts your foot in your mouth. Yeah, I don't love how he doesn't even smile. He doesn't get any of my jokes. It's making me want to stop making jokes, but I can't, apparently. I'm too used to it. Anyway, that's kind of its own super awkward joke in its own right at this point, is all my failed jokes. So anyway, I'm not trying to take back anything I said. I know I've said dumb things. So there it is. Yeah, seriously, hundreds. I've been broadcasting chess since the Tall Memorial in 2009 or something, where Magnus Carlsen became the #1 rated player in FIDE ratings. So yeah. Anyway, onto this game in this match. Shimanov, Alexander, one single game. They tag him in for round 4 against the first board of the San Jose Hackers, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, #3 rated rapid player in the world. Things did not go his way today. He had a draw against Durar Bailey right out of the opening, or right in the opening. They didn't really play. Presumably he thought with black he couldn't really win or something, or couldn't force an advantage. And then here he comes in and plays against Shimanov, who has been preparing and waiting just for this one game. Shimanov, surprisingly, just trades off on f4 here, ef4, gf4, very quickly. Seemingly a great position for white. Sacks his pawn with a4. If the white queen just retreats, black gets knight takes c4. So white has to take this pawn sack. Black gets active. He's got this option of like, yeah, so the follow-up is bishop f5. And he's got this option that's now in the air of knight c5 as well, attacking d3 and e4 and the queen. He couldn't do it on the previous move because of queen takes rook. And, you know, you just sacked another exchange, but white's all good. So he plays this a4 pawn sack. I wonder if it was still in his prep. Followed up by bishop f5 going after e4. So the e-file looking a bit shaky for white here. Mamedyarov tries to hold it down with knight f2, knight c5 comes, and black takes on e4. Even though it's defended enough times. Trade, 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 queen e7 at the end. Boom, get the piece back. And Shimanov has completely opened things up, traded off all his cramped pieces, let loose the snake, the bishop on g7, and the rook on the e-file. So he's got like an unequivocally great position here after this series of trades. So if he prepared this, extremely good prep. If he didn't prepare this, like incredible skill there with the King's Indian, nice insight to catch this option. I have not seen this like maneuver before of just giving up the e5 square, giving white this double pawn, and double pawn, not doubled pawns, but double pawn, you know, pawn pair, strong pawn pair in the center, and then knight to b6 going after c4. Very, very unusual, I think. Hadn't seen that before. Anyway, so it plays out to this position here. Black has undisputed control of the e-file and the long diagonal, so probably this is positionally winning, in my opinion. This rook is also developed. I mean, it's just gorgeous. And he wins in like 1 or 2 moves from here, pretty much. Yeah, he could have prepared this much. It's possible. I mean, he only played Mamedyarov. Mamedyarov does sometimes play the fianchetto variation against the King's Indian. It's possible he could have prepared this, or, you know, yeah. So rook f2. Black basically, well, he can't, if he wants to try and crack white here, he actually needs this like h-pawn, like big time, because the way to crack white here would be like queen e2, trade queens, rook e2, and then take the pawns on b2 and a2 and win the endgame. That's the simplest way to win this position. That's by h5, h4. If you try to win the position some other way, I'm not sure how easily you could try and make progress here. Like, I don't know, you could go after this f pawn, you could go after the b pawn, but I think you have to kind of kick this knight if you want to break through. Because right now it's on a very useful square, but it doesn't really have any other squares, so this h5 seems like the way to go to me. So rook moves, bishop d4. He's trying to put his knight on f1 in response to h4, I think, and use his rook to cover this move queen e2. But bishop d4 just attacking the rook, and now the rook has to choose between defending the f-pawn, defending the second row, etc., right? Rook comes here. And how am I drawing the arrows? By right-clicking on a chess.com analysis board in live chess. So here, you know, the f-pawn's hanging, knight h5 might keep white in the game. Shimanov played his one mistake of the game here. He played queen e1 check, just thinking it was over, that like Mamedyarov was just mated and resigning here. You know, like this. I think he just got giddy for a second. The game went his way so easily and so perfectly. But the correct move here would surely be rook takes a2. With the same idea that if they take, you've got just back rank mate. And after rook takes a2, if white doesn't take it and instead runs his king over here looking for somewhere safe, then you break through on b2 as well. And you know, now you've got 2 extra pawns and you're continuing to strafe through along the second row. You can play h4 in a moment probably, you know, get some position like this and h4. Send the pony to h1, and this is just too miserable. We're not going to analyze this. So anyway, so Shimanov jumps the gun a little bit here, gets super excited with queen e1, and misses that Mamedyarov can actually answer rook to g1, stopping checkmate, because this rook is still covering g1 for the moment. And then here he stopped and thought for a long time and collected himself. And luckily his position is so good he can still win. So, you know, he can just collect himself, give himself a talking to, Like, okay, it's not going to be that easy to beat Mamedyarov. You know, got to take this guy seriously, even though I've got a good position. Got to really be careful. If I miss one more thing, like rook to g1, like, I'm going to blow this game. So he bears down, trades the queen for 2 rooks. Definitely correct to do that, rather than just backing up. Although backing up would have been fine, too. His position's really good. Then comes the e-file. So now, he'll always have rook e2 as a huge threat. If the white queen weren't lost, but on some other square, then rook e2 would basically checkmate white. So white needs to keep the knight defending e2. Well, problem. Black has this move h4 threatened. So pretty hard for white to keep this knight on g3. So Mamedyarov goes for some last-ditch tactics, basically, here. He's got to try and break open the black king position and look for a perpetual with his queen. H3 is mate after knight h1. You're saying I should have analyzed one move further? Oh my god, that's disgusting. To trap the knight on h1 and then the king on g2. But you see, that's that instinct that kicks in. The position's so winning, we're not even going to analyze it. And it was really winning. That's like as winning as a position can be, really. So I wasn't wrong in my evaluation. Okay. So on with the game. So Mamedyarov's mission is clear. He's got to try and like get his queen in to get some perpetual check, right? Like he's got to do something like this, offer the knight, come in here, and hope that he's got a perpetual check with this kind of thing. Which I think he doesn't even have a perpetual check there. There is a good question that I'm going to stop to answer for a second in the chat. Why not play h4 since you absolutely have to stop this move, h4 by black? That seems pretty reasonable, and that's what I expected white to play during the game. So very good question, Ryan. Thank you for asking that. Let's look at that for a second before we see the conclusion of the game. I think that what will happen then let me see. I think what will happen then is like the bishop retreat and rook g1, rook e3, something like that. But let's see in practice how exactly does that happen. Let's try bishop d4. Actually, I mean c5 is just safer, so there's not queen d3 hitting the bishop. So let's try this. Now, just for argument's sake, let's play f5 for white. And now I'll play rook g1 check. King to h2, let's say, because I think it's fairly obvious that on king f3, rook e3 wins, and on king h3, rook e3 wins, right? Is that pretty clear? So let's just say that the white king goes to h2. But now the thing is, I'm going to go to g3 anyway, as to e3 anyway. And if king takes here, then rook e2 wins the queen. So I come to e3 anyway, threatening the knight. And now white has to choose between sacking the knight with f takes g6 or trying to move the knight somewhere. Let's see, does knight e4 work out? Knight e4 does work out. So this is not as simple. Now on rook g4, there's knight f6. So white does have some counterplay there. And if we come back here, threatening the knight and threatening rook e2, he can always come back here. And I still need to deal with this piece. Interesting. Okay, so I didn't win yet. I didn't win yet against h4. Still some work to be done. Maybe there isn't like an instant win. Maybe you just keep playing. You know? Because now if white ever plays f5, then there's going to be bishop e5 as an additional disaster for the knight here, which white can't allow. So like f5 now, rook here, pawn takes, bishop here, check. I don't know. This is still messy. There's still plenty of shots for white at a perpetual. I think h4 is well. I think we can say h4 seems to be the right move, at least, like a better resistance to prevent h4 from black. It still gives some chance for white. Yeah. I'm pretty sure black can win this with good play, but there's no instantaneous win. Not as easy as in the game. So I think that's the better defense. Yeah, so someone's suggesting this variation, this here, here, and now this. But again, white's going to take here instead of here. He's not going to walk into what I imagine you wanted to do, which is this. So he's going to take on d4, and then you still have to play with the rooks against the queen. Now, I mean, it should still be winning. You know, I'm just saying there's definitely some work left when you play this way. I mean, if we play this out for like 10 or 20 moves, playing good moves for black, black will be eventually winning all these positions with and there's queen takes g3 as well, actually, in this particular variation with the king on h2. That's right. Good call. Here. Yep. So yeah, so there's no instant win, but if you just keep playing good moves for black in this position, black will eventually win. You know, maybe even f5 is a good move, just so there's no f5 for white, and you know, then drop your bishop back and eventually go after white with the rooks. But two rooks are a winning material advantage against the queen, and the white knight's not very good, so the bishop is better than it, so it can be won. So after f5, plays g5 instead of h4, which h4 probably works for black, but Shimanov was like, I'm taking no risk of a perpetual here. So here Mamedyarov wants to go queen f6. He doesn't allow it. He wants to go queen h5. He doesn't allow it. He wants to go queen g5. He doesn't allow it. And Mamedyarov resigns because his queen is actually trapped. So once Shimanov collected himself, he won the two rooks against queen position without any real trouble. So that was a big point for them. Really major for Webster in terms of winning this match. Now I'm going to show you another super sick game from the same match. This game here is, I think, a real crowd pleaser. I think a lot of people would be into this. So here's a queen's gambit accepted. This d takes c5 move is known to be like the most boring, or whatever is like kind of the reputation, right? Like just trading queens right away. What's white even trying to do here? Maybe just get a draw, but after Durai Bailey tries to grab that pawn on b2, Izoria says, okay, no queens on the board, no problem, and starts going for a serious attack here. f3, e4 to trap the bishop is the threat, so he can't just castle. Gets the pawn on e5. And stops castling. I'm pretty sure something bad would happen if he just castled here. What I'm thinking is takes, and rook b1, attacking this knight. And I think that black just loses because of the d5 bishop hanging. So he goes bishop e6, and now Izoria keeps him from castling. Advances his pawns, and here's the breakthrough. f5. Well, the bishop's still trapped, as it has been throughout the game, so he force feeds him that f pawn, opens everything up, And now it's no surprise that white's getting really, really close to checkmate here. And in fact, in this position, the first amazing variations start to pop up. Let's say black plays rook to d8. White wins with, well, let's bring the other rook over. Rook check, bishop blocks, rook e6, and that. But then, what if black goes to c8 instead, leaving his king aloft? Can white do anything then? Oh, rook check, bishop blocks, take it anyway, takes, check. Ooh, the crisscross. Sorry, crisscross. Makes the king jump to d8, and then, boom. The knight finishes it off. Ooh. So, things are getting exciting and fun, and unfortunately, or fortunately, Durabili plays f6 here. So now Zviad has like the very, very boring option of taking on a8 and winning with an extra rook. Luckily for us, Zviad is like, not today. Not going to grind this out today. Zviad, by the way, very good at grinding out winning endgames. But he's like, today there will be no grinding. Here he comes. Chases the king. It's like, you know, I'm coming here, not here. My bishop, no, he's too good. Not trading him for this rook. The rook runs away. Rook g3. King here. Bishop comes back. His only job was getting out of the way of this rook. King here. All right, so he closes in on the king with this bishop pair. There was no way to stop this rook h3, by the way, in this position. There's no move for black to stop rook h3, g3. I mean, look, none of his pieces can get anywhere in time to do anything, right? And there's a perfect mate, right? Each square covered just by one piece. Over here. Well, I guess g3 is covered twice, so that's not perfect. Not a pure mate, but almost. So that got one back for the hackers. Very nice one. But I think one of the decisive games for the entire match, yeah. I think like decisive game for the entire match. Now I'm about to show you guys an anti-highlight for a second. So try to keep the taste of this 2-rook sacrifice checkmate in your mouth for a moment, because we're about to see the ugly side of chess. There's always highlights and lowlights. That's just how things go. You know, for one thing to be great, there has to be something less great than it. Light means nothing without dark, or maybe it's the other way around. So Naroditsky here playing black, board 2 for the hackers against Ilya Nizhnik. Now, Webster sacrificed board 4 with an 1800 rated player in round 1 in order to play 3 2600 rated GMs. This was some serious. Where are my pairings? I don't have my pairings. This was some seriously like clever work by Webster, and I alluded to this before, that they had really like put some serious thought into every round, like who was playing who. Right? And like having Shimanov ready to play the board 1 showdown against Mamedyarov in the last round, and having only prepared and put all his energy into that one game. Another side of their preparation was that in round 1, Webster played an 1800 on board 4 so that they could run 3 2600 plus GMs here. So their board 3 is Ilya Nizhnik, you know, like former child prodigy 14-year-old GM from the Ukraine, 2600 plus FIDE. Against Naroditsky, not a huge underdog. So their plan was like, our board 3 is going to get this score against, is going to try to score against board 2 in the first round. Despite that, Naroditsky played just like a fantastic game with this all the way throughout. And here he came up with this very nice knight maneuver to d2. The white queen has to cover c5 and d5. It can't, really. And Naroditsky emerges with an extra pawn in the endgame. And then he's playing very well. White's under huge pressure here. He finds a good chance to play h4. He's getting really close to winning this game. Gets his pawn through to h3. E5 break. Now, there's a number of things that he could have done to maybe win this endgame. But he goes queen h7, assuming, you know, I'm a pawn up. He can't trade queens. If he runs away with his queen, I take on g3 and I've won another pawn. But now Nizhnik trades queens, and suddenly the h-pawn is lost. I read both chats, Stapler. But I also occasionally look at the chessboard and think about what I'm trying to teach. So I don't read every single chat in every single position. And now he's stuck here in this endgame. It should be a draw now for Nizhnik. You know, if Naroditsky just puts his king on h5 or something and sits there. But he now tries to win anyway, like this, by trying to get his king on the flanking side of this pawn with the idea to play like f5. If White plays something like h4, you know, you can see his plan here. When he plays f5, the king is stuck and White loses to the black king that's advanced here. But key move for White, king to g4. Now if Black plays f5, he can go to g5, and he's always got his eye on this. So eventually the black king's actually going to have to leave these pawns be. Let's see what would actually happen. I think it would still be a draw, right? Or did he just lose? Or could he still have won with this variation? Hang on. Maybe you should go here now. Here and h5. And now White wins anyway, huh? Yeah. So king g5, g6, h4, and eventually, and White still wins with his h-pawn. Yeah. So basically, I think he like miscalculated. He was trying to go for f5 and like lock the white king and win, but the white king came forward so quickly that then he's actually losing if he lets the white king and pawn come forward. So he plays g6, trying to keep the king out. h4 is played. He plays king d4. If he plays f5 check, you know, he's realized at this point that, you know, he has to move his king, takes here, and White gets there first. So he plays some other move, but now he's basically just losing to the passed h-pawn. So, you know, should have been a win for Naroditsky if he kept playing as well as he had earlier in the game. And like worst case scenario, he should have just like, oh, lost my pawn, I'll make a draw. Instead, he tries to win it anyway, loses the king and pawn ending to a bad miscalculation. And that point in the first round, you know, for Webster, I think really, really huge for them eventually winning the match. Could have gone completely the other way. All right, and